All right, good morning, everybody. This is Event Trader here, Gavin McGuire. I'm being joined by our Special Situations Analyst, Carmine Ateo. Carmine, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, pretty good, Gavin.
So, Carmine, wanted to break in. Number one, this politics in the market segment, just to ease everybody's concern. It's certainly not meant to provide any political view on our side. We're not a political website, nor do we pretend to be. But what we do want to do is keep an eye on politics, geopolitical events, and how they could impact different stocks out there and your investment portfolio. And that's the goal of this segment. So with that in mind, Carmine, there was some noise overnight with regards to U.S. and EU trade relations. So why don't we first take a quick look at an update on where that trade talk's going with the U.S. and EU, maybe update people on exactly what went on and what the ramifications are, and we'll talk about a couple of stocks that could be involved here too.
Okay. The USTR overnight proposed tariffs on $11 billion worth of imports from the European Union. The amount is subject to an arbitration by the WTO. The WTO is expected to rule on that this summer, which is just in time for the USTR's 90-day review to be completed. So basically, the tariff proposal is related to a U.S. dispute regarding EU aircraft size subsidies that is currently being litigated at the WTO. This is in regards to Airbus subsidies that the EU provides to countries there. So some of the products that will be included in this tariff decision will be helicopters, aircraft, meat products, dairy products, and motorcycles. Now, the USTR may not get all 11 billion of it approved by the WTO, but they're going to try. So the final number might be less than that. Some of these products might be removed to make room for that number being less. But as of right now, they're proposing $11 billion worth of products, and those are the products that will be listed. Once again, those helicopters, aircraft, meat products, dairy products, and motorcycles. So some of the stocks that might be impacted by this are Boeing, SPR, UTX, Rolls-Royce, HRL for dairy products, TSN for meat products, DF for dairy products as well, and of course HOG for motorcycles.
Okay, so this process is going to take how long to play out now?
It will take 90 days for the USTR review process, and it will also take a few months for the WTO to issue a ruling on their end. So the USTR has to wait for the WTO to issue a ruling first. So that's basically why they did this 3 months ahead of time, to kind of get their process going so they can have their review process done by the time the WTO rules. That way they can just move forward with this, move forward with the retaliatory tariffs because of the EU subsidies on Airbus right away without having to wait another 3 months after the decision.
Okay, so
basically the summary should know something.
Okay, so basically the headlines we'd want to be watching on that end would be coming from the World Trade Organization.
Correct. We have to wait for the World Trade Organization to issue their ruling. Now the World Trade Organization is probably going to come back and say that the amount of tariffs that the U.S. wants to put on is not going to work out. It might come up in a number like 8 to 9 billion, somewhere in there would be my guess. And the USTR might come back and say, hey, we want a little bit more. So they might go back and forth a little bit before the final decision is released. But the USTR's initial request is $11 billion worth of tariffs against these EU subsidies on Airbus that they feel were unjustified.
Okay. So I guess the one thing I wouldn't be completely cleared on is how do meat products and dairy products fall in with the Airbus?
Well, these are the tariffs. That's a good question. These are tariffs that that are retaliatory tariffs that the USTR wants to put in place. So that they are tariffing aircraft parts and other things, but I'm not exactly sure why they threw those other things in there. But I think that this is just an opportunity for the U.S. to, because of the Trump administration's tariff policy, to try to put more tariffs on products that they wanted to for other times and use this as a method of doing so. That would be my guess, but I'm not exactly sure why those tariffs are included in that. Another thing to look out for is this upcoming auto tariff review, which is due on May 18th. Now that's going to be a kind of a big deal because $11 billion worth of tariffs is not really that much compared to a $550 billion amount of imports that the U.S. sends to the U.S. The EU rather sends to the U.S. every month. But auto tariffs would be a significant deal. So if this kind of if these tariffs kind of infringe on the talks going on in the EU right now to try to get our trade situation resolved, that could hurt the Trump administration's plans to put auto tariffs in place. So we have to keep watching that as well. The deadline for that is May 18th.
Okay, real quick, while Carmine and I are talking here, we are seeing a little bit of a bounce in the markets. S&P moving back towards that 2888 area, which would be the intraday session high. So we'll continue to monitor this while I talk with Carmine. So Carmine, you had mentioned the auto tariff date with the EU earlier. Just provide us looking for an update on China. Earlier, we had seen a headline about the Trump administration looking to potentially have a deal with China in place ahead of this date. Do you think that's something that the Trump administration would prefer, to try to have a China trade deal set up before battling the EU on their tariffs? Is that how you're kind of viewing that headline?
Yeah, I think they would prefer that. Whether or not it gets done is another question. President Trump said last week that he would expect the trade deal to be completed to where they can meet at a presidential summit within 4 weeks. Now, as you know, Gavin, these deadlines keep getting pushed back. Remember, first was the beginning of March, and now we're into April, and we still don't have a presidential summit scheduled. So we'll have to wait until early May at least to see what the administration wants to do. But we are getting close to that deadline, and 4 weeks from now kind of meets up with that deadline. So it would make sense that that's what they're trying to do. But whether or not they can get everything done and all the I's dotted and the T's crossed by that point remains an open question, because there still are some major items to be worked out. You know, I kind of had a little laugh when they said, well, 90% of what we need to do is done, but the only thing we need to do is IP theft and enforcement. But those are one of the two biggest issues that need to be worked out. It's kind of like what somebody saying, well, I got my car built, everything except for the engine and the radiator. So, yeah. So it's, there's still a lot of things to be worked out. So I'm not exactly sure they can meet that deadline. And again, these deadlines seem to always get pushed back. So we'll see what happens there. But they are trying to, I would think their goal is to try to wrap it up before battling the EU. But whether or not that gets done is an open question. And even the May 18th deadline can be pushed back as well. The important thing to take away from our talk here is that there's no hard deadlines. All these deadlines can be pushed back if need be. So.
Okay, and what's the next important date we should be watching out for with the U.S.-China talks?
I would say about 4 weeks from now. We're 4 weeks from last week or so that would be put maybe early May. Right now, Larry Kudlow said on Fox News last Sunday, I believe, that they were going to continue talks on the phone this week. So let's see if anything comes out of that, and then maybe we'll have another face-to-face meeting scheduled. But the important thing is to look out for a presidential summit between President Trump and President Xi. That'll be a key, I think, for the markets to kind of get an idea that things are getting close to completion. Until that's scheduled, I wouldn't count on anything getting completed until that date is scheduled.
All right. So moving along, there's a number of hearings this week on Capitol Hill. You want to provide us a general list of what we should be looking for and potential headlines we need to be on the watch?
Yeah, some of these are already begun, but I'm going to go through them here. Attorney General William Barr is testifying right now to the House on the FY20 budget. I've been listening to it, and most of the questions so far have been about Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. He says to testify on that topic again on May 2nd. So he'll be called up there again and talk more about that. But the next item was Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin is testifying right now on the budget in another House committee. He could get a couple questions on trade, but I wouldn't expect too much to come out of that. The bank CEOs tomorrow will testify to the House Financial Services Committee. Now, this is ahead of their earnings reports that are expected this week. We have J.P. Morgan, we have Wells Fargo, and we have PNC, as you know, Gavin, coming out later this week.
Right.
So they might ask a couple questions about President Trump's comments that the economy needs more quantitative easing and lower interest rates. So that might be some things to look out for. Other than that, I expect them to just grill them on things that they've been talking about for a while now that are probably more noise than anything else coming out of that.
Do you expect that to be kind of a regular occurrence with a Democrat-controlled House for them to kind of continue to bring the banks up in front for a grilling like this?
Yeah, I think the banks and the drug companies CEOs might as well just get another house in Washington D.C. because they're going to be called up there a lot. And again, this is just it's more. I think it's more noise than anything else.
Sure.
But there will be some headlines that will come across that might impact the stocks. So I want to get it on everybody's radar.
Okay, and then the last one that we have to talk about is that Wednesday, right? Tomorrow, big one for the tech names.
Yeah, tomorrow, Facebook, Google, and Twitter are going to give Senate testimony on censorship of conservative voices on their platforms. Again, this is more than likely not too
politically
much
motivated by the Senate. More.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not. I wouldn't expect too much market moving to come out of this. Actually, Google and Twitter are testifying to the House on a different topic today on white nationalism. So they. But again, both of these hearings, I wouldn't expect anything to come out of it as far as the markets, but wanted to get it on everyone's radar.
Okay, and then the last thing you had noted to me in our pre-meeting notes here was just an update on cannabis legislation and where we stand on that.
Yeah, there was a couple of notable, I thought pretty interesting votes that came out of New Jersey last week, or I think it was 2 weeks ago now. New Jersey failed to pass a law legalizing recreational marijuana despite Democrats having control of the House, Senate, and the governor's mansion. There were many disagreements on how to do it. A lot of disagreements on how it will be taxed. There were some 40 some odd towns that are very close to New York City that said we don't want marijuana in our town, so they had to deal with that issue. So I think this is just kind of I wouldn't say a wake-up call, but a kind of just an item to note that nothing's easy in politics, getting things passed. Even this has 65% support, as you know, Gavin, nationally. I could think of many other things that have 65% support and never get put into law. So New York's having similar issues with their bill to legalize recreational marijuana. They have several towns that want to opt out of it. I wouldn't be surprised that when Illinois tries to bring this up, that they have several towns that want to opt out of it. So I think it's just going to be a harder thing than most of the bulls on this space realize that could get done.
So a lot of the hang-up is, number one, a couple of towns that are holding out. But for me, it seems like the bigger issue is the battle around the use of the taxing of it.
Right.
Would that be a correct way to look at it?
Yeah, that's a correct way to look at it. And but the towns opting out are an important issue because, if everybody's on board, you might say, okay, well, we just want to do it in certain cities or certain towns that are all for it, and not do it statewide. So that's an important thing to look out for as well.
All right, Carmine. Well, always appreciate the insight that you're bringing on this. Is there anything you'd like to add, anything of note, anything that's coming up in the next week or two on the hearing front that you want to give an early heads up on?
Yeah, actually, they are going on vacation for 2 weeks after Friday, so it should be pretty quiet.
So it should be pretty quiet the next couple of weeks. Everybody clearing the table for some good old-fashioned earnings, right?
Yep, exactly.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm sure the markets will appreciate that. All right. Well, Carmine, thank you very much for this update. It's always very much appreciated. And I'll post some of Carmine's comments to the page for perusal, and we will be posting this too for anybody that wants to re-listen to it, and keep an eye out on potential headlines for what's really a quiet week on the company news information front, with little earnings to speak of until Friday. So, Carmine, you have yourself a great day, and we'll talk to everybody shortly.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. Bye.
Thank you, Carmine.